WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington. Welcome to the Politics Hour starring Aaron Davis. I'm Kojo Nnamdi. Tom Sherwood is on vacation again. Aaron Davis is a reporter with the Washington Post. He joins us today as our guest analyst. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Also in studio with us is Kenyon McDuffie. He is a D.C. council member representing Ward 5. Councilmember McDuffie, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Kojo.
Not to jump ahead to next week, but we do have an announcement of sorts to make about our next edition of the Politics Hour. We're going to be doing something new, and the best way to put it, well, we'll just let this lakeside song describe what we're up to. Yeah, that was Michael Martinez's idea. Next Friday, September 18th, we're going all the way live on the Politics Hour with our guest, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, and you can join us in person. This special broadcast will take place at WAMU 88.5 in front of a live audience in our Black Box Theater. The event is free, but only a limited number of seats are available. You can go to wamu.org/events to reserve your seats. And if you're interested in watching the show right now, we are live streaming at our website, kojoshow.org. You can watch the show right there. Well, Aaron Davis, Councilmember McDuffie, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake of Baltimore has decided she is not going to run for re-election. This in the wake of a settlement of $6.4 million announced this week to the family of Freddie Gray, the young man who was killed after being taken away by police in Baltimore earlier this year. And the judge in the case in which 6 police officers are charged in the arrest and death of Freddie Gray, Judge Barry Williams, says he will not be moving that trial out of Baltimore. He says the citizens of Baltimore are not monolithic. They think for themselves until he is given further reason. If they cannot find a jury, for instance, then the trial will be taking place in Baltimore. Your thoughts on any and all of this?
Well, it's a couple fascinating developments here, really, and I'm just struck, of course, by what happened today with the mayor announcing that she will not seek re-election. And in one ways, you could just say, "Wow," and another, if you really stand back and think about it for a second, the Freddie Gray case was really going to loom over her for this whole duration. If you just look at the website of the Baltimore Sun this morning. No, the headlines before this included the Freddie Gray case is going to cost the city millions. The unrest is from the riots is affecting the housing market. The mayor and police are clashing over the settlement money. I mean, in every way, this was going to be part of her re-election context. And before you look forward to who's going to run and replace her, I think think about what a stunning fall this is for the mayor. I was in January at the DNC meeting where she introduced President Obama. And you had her, kind of the region's 2 rising political stars, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake and Muriel Bowser was there doing the introduction. And now she was the secretary of the DNC. Now where will she go from here? We can talk about how those dominoes might fall, but before anything else, the uncertainty that this creates in Baltimore, I think, should also be addressed. What will happen with this police department? Well, this new interim chief, Kevin Davis, that they've got, are the police going to listen to him? Wondering who will he be answering to come the next term? There's a lot of questions. Look, Baltimore has surpassed New York City in real numbers as far as homicides this year. So there's a lot of real uncertainty. I think this continues to perpetuate.
You've given this much more thought than I expected that you would, but thank you very much for that. The Baltimore Sun editorialized today that Baltimore needed and needs a bold and dynamic leader who can heal its wounds, knit the community back together, and set a new course. We mean no insult, says the editorial, but that is not who Ms. Rawlings-Blake is. During the last 5 months, people across the city realized that, and evidently, so did she. Councilmember McDuffie, I'm going to ask you to put on your lawyer's hat for this one. In the $6.4 million settlement given to the family of Freddie Gray, this was announced by the administration. It was not a judicial measure. It seems to be a kind of political settlement. Given the unrest that has accompanied the settlement, do you think that settlement can have any effect on the legal trial of the 6 officers involved?
Well, I'm not sure if it's going to have any effect on the legal trial. It is a little unusual in sense of the timing in which it was offered and accepted by the family. I will say that I imagine it helps the Gray family at least try to get past some of the things that have occurred over the last several months. We all saw the riots and the other things play out in Baltimore, and I know that the family is still reeling, having not had a trial yet for the officers who've been charged. And so I think it is a little unusual to have a settlement come before a trial has already concluded. But I think the closer that the Gray family can get to getting past this and really trying to get some sense of closure, the better off they'll be.
The defense, obviously, of the 6 police officers, or some of the lawyers of the defendants, are saying that one of the difficulties in putting a jury pool together is that jurors might believe that since there has already been a settlement, that implies that these officers are already guilty. Given your experience as a prosecutor, how difficult will it be to pull a jury together?
Well, I think jury is unpredictable. And whether or not there's a settlement, there's a lot of other information that's been put out by the public and the media. I think, you'd be hard pressed to find a person who's, totally oblivious to what's occurred in Baltimore over the last several months. Even if the venue were to change, I think that you're going to have folks across the state of Maryland who are intimately familiar with some of the facts and the details that have been reported in the news media. And so I think the decision by the judge, Williams, was a decision that the majority of the residents of Baltimore probably appreciate and support, to have the trial actually take place in the city where the actual incident occurred.
And Aaron Davis, you covered Maryland as a reporter. Of course, this is all about Freddie Gray, but you cannot look at all of this without noticing the name of one other prominent person in Baltimore, Billy Murphy.
Sure.
He was the attorney for Freddie Gray in this situation, and he is, in a lot of ways, Baltimore's Johnny Cochran.
Well, there you go. And you've got a lot of more people are going to come up and take the headline on this. Will Sheila Dixon, will she come forward and run
for mayor? Yeah.
Will, I was kicking this idea around with a couple of my old colleagues and sources in Maryland this morning, but there's a certain former mayor and governor who might not be elected president this year who could also come back. But
you think so?
Probably not.
I bet you don't dare mention his name. Not Martin O'Malley. You couldn't be talking. Okay, on to the business at hand in the city. Our guest is Kenyon McDuff. He's a D.C. council member representing Ward 5. Tom Sherwood will be back with us next week when we'll be having a studio audience here with the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser. You can go to wmu.org/events to reserve your seat. And Aaron Davis is our guest analyst. He's a reporter with the Washington Post. Councilmember McDuffie, homelessness has been a growing issue here in the district, including efforts to close the city's largest homeless shelter, DC General. It's in a state of disrepair. Mayor Bowser announced recently that families can apply for emergency shelter anytime, not just on freezing nights. Talk about the expansion of homeless services and why the shift.
Well, I heard the mayor's announcement. I support the mayor's plan to close DC General. I think she's going to receive a lot of support across the city in closing DC General. I've been inside DC General on a number of occasions. I'm familiar with the conditions, and I am supportive of the idea of closing the shelter and having smaller shelters and smaller housing, I should say, for families who need shelter across the city, so that it's not concentrated in this one place. And I think what I heard the mayor say in her announcement was that every neighborhood across the District of Columbia needs to support. Needs to bear some responsibility for trying to make sure that we house our homeless and our most vulnerable in the District of Columbia. And I am a huge supporter of that concept and making sure that we have a different way of housing our homeless in the District of Columbia. I think it's high time that DC General is closed. And so I'm extremely supportive of that idea and hope that we can move forward with that in the District of Columbia.
Policy comes with other changes, including one that you and the council would have to approve, and that is allowing the city to provide families with temporary shelter while their cases are reviewed any time of the year.
Well, I mean, again, it's challenging in the sense that the financials associated with it. We all have read the headlines and read the stories about how much it costs to make sure that we properly shelter people, particularly during hypothermia season. And we're not going to get away from that. So making sure that we have a better plan in place and try to head off some of the issues that we've experienced in the district over the years, I think is the right idea. And I think that once we have an opportunity with my colleagues to review the proposal by the mayor, I'm hopeful we'll have some support to move in a different direction here in the district.
Right.
Aaron.
Yeah, I think the real fascinating thing that the mayor has done here is to open up the shelters year round. So it no longer has to be a freezing night below 32 degrees where you can have access to the shelter if you're a family. As it stands now, or until now, if the last freezing day in April or May, if you don't get in that night, you can't get in and get on the track to get the long-term care and the workplace development and everything else you might need until the next freezing day in the fall. So the question is for the mayor, and there's a test coming up because she's been doing this all summer, and they've placed hundreds of families over the course of the summer. Will that alleviate any of the pent-up demand that is usually seen at the first freezing nights of fall and winter? Or will this just continue to expand for now? And some of the leading homeless experts in the country say it's going to take a couple of years for DC's current state to kind of hit an equilibrium. So you could see a lot more still this year.
800-433-8850 is the number. Our guest is Councilmember Kenyon McDuffie. He's a DC council member who represents Ward 5. What do you think should be done about the homeless situation in Washington, D.C.? 800-433-8850. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, ask a question, or watch the live video stream. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org or shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. Pope Francis will be in D.C. in less than 2 weeks, and people are already fretting about the impact of a papal visit on transit and traffic. People who can are being encouraged to telework during that time, including federal employees. How is the city preparing?
I'm sorry, Coach.
For the visit of the Pope.
Oh, well, we're preparing very well. You have the mayor announce with the chief and others in emergency management what the plan is. As a resident, I got to tell you, I live right on North Capitol Street, Coach, right around the corner from the shrine where the Pope will be visiting. And we imagine, even with all the preparation that the city has in place, working hard with DOT and our other first responders, it's going to be really difficult to get around in the city. And you can anticipate that. And so if you can avoid going to work, I know the federal government and others have put in place policies that would allow folks to telework. Please try to take advantage of those policies. This is a great time to be in the District of Columbia. We really welcome and look forward to the Pope's visit. But you can imagine that it will be difficult to navigate the streets in the District of Columbia when he arrives.
I certainly intend to be teleworking on those days if they'll let me. This week, Mayor Bowser submitted proposed legislation on police body cameras that included broader exemptions for withholding footage than she had proposed a month ago. What would be the circumstances for now police officials to be able to withhold footage? I know, Aaron, you've been covering this, but first you, Councilmember McDuffie. Yeah,
as you all know, I've been really a strong supporter of body-worn cameras here in the District of Columbia, and have been trying to move forward towards a policy that can be supported by not only my colleagues on the council, but also advocates in the community. And so I'm really pleased that we've arrived at a point where we have draft regulations that have been submitted by the mayor, at least circulated with the folks who have been involved. And it's going to be, I think, a more transparent policy than where we started off some months ago. That's going to allow for body camera footage to be viewed through FOIA rules that already exist. It won't be a complete blanket FOIA exemption, but on the other hand, it also is going to protect the privacy of individuals, many of them who are vulnerable, who might have concerns about footage getting into the wrong hands. And so I think we're at a place where we can definitely see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think there's still some concerns with the existing policy, and we can sort of delve a little bit more deeply into those.
Please delve, Aaron.
Yeah. So, to back up one step here, just to say that you're right. The mayor here has announced or given the council the particulars of some broad ideas she laid out a month ago, and the one category that's new that we didn't talk about a month ago, wasn't included in some memos, that all assaults, if a police officer comes up on a drunken fight, gang attacking someone, that all that video would be exempt from FOIA. You couldn't see that under public records request. Also, there's a point in time where if you file a complaint against an officer and that leads to a charge against that officer, then you can't get a copy of that footage until it works its way through the legal process. Now, a lot of these are
also if the officer files a complaint against you, you cannot see that.
If the charge is filed against you, then the kind of the legal proceedings, they say, we'll listen to the court and we'll distribute it then.
But let me ask this question, because I asked it in our billboard and I'm not sure about the answer. This suggests to me that in both of those incidents, in both of those cases, if you are filing a complaint against the officer, or if the officer is filing a complaint against you, you can't see the video, but the officer can?
All right. Well, there's a window I want to be very clear and point out, because I know that the mayor's office is very sensitive to this issue, and I think they are even debating like what exactly the law how it could be interpreted by judges. But there is a 90-day window that they're proposing, in which if you have an interaction with a police officer that you think didn't go the right way, you can go to your local police station, request to see that footage. You can take a copy of it. You can shoot it with your cell phone. You could view it, and then you could leave. And if what you see prompts you to then file a complaint, you could do that. You know, how quickly, if an officer files charges immediately, if you ever have access to that before it goes through court, that's not clear. You know, the Bowser administration is doing something, to give them credit, that really no other big city is doing. Instead of having a blanket ban like LA or Chicago, they're trying to come up with detailed proposals. But that inherently...
I want to give her some credit. I don't mean to cut you off, Aaron, but you got to remember, the council, through our legislation in the BSA, actually required the engagement with the public stakeholder group. And that, I think, has been part of the collaboration now that we see with the Bowser administration and the council and stakeholders. And so I think what the district is doing as a whole, both through its legislative body and its executive, you're seeing what I hope to be you know, policies and a bill that could be replicated around the country.
Sure. We're sitting here with the author of the part of the budget that, in fact, required that the Bowser administration do this process and talk to stakeholders and talk to groups of, you know, that represent sexual assault victims and others. And so there's a lot of cases where there's clear understanding that there should be exemptions from allowing all the body camera footage out. And the Bowser administration largely has drawn this line of, if something happens in public, you don't have an expectation of privacy that what's happening. If anybody can come up with their camera and shoot it, then, you know, it could be viewed by a body-worn camera as well, and so it should be public. If it happens behind closed doors in a home, somewhere where there's a greater expectation of privacy, especially if a sexual assault or domestic assault is in progress, that should be kept secret or kept private and only releasable through the court.
But the conditions he's now applying to it, Councilmember McDuffie, it could put her at odds with several of your colleagues who favor more access for the public when it comes to body camera videos. Where do you stand right now?
Well, I favor more access. And again, as Aaron just stated, you know, I was the chief proponent, along with my colleagues on the council, who have been, you know, rock solid on this issue of trying to make sure that we have a policy that was more transparent than the blanket FOIA exemption that was initially proposed with the budget by the mayor. Now, there are a number of things that were just said. I want to kind of try to unpack some of this, Kojo, without getting too far into the weeds. But I think you made a statement earlier about a person who perhaps is you know, alleging a complaint about an officer not having access. Well, just to try to run down a little bit of it, law enforcement agencies, including the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Attorney General's Office, would have obviously and naturally access, unredacted access to the footage that's captured on body-worn cameras, including the Metropolitan Police Department. But the way that the rules are currently drafted, and just to have your listeners know, these are still in draft form. There's still a process where there's going to be a 30-day comment period where folks will be able to weigh in. As chair of the Judiciary Committee, I intend to have a hearing on this. But the recordings will be made available for view at the area police stations when an incident occurs to persons who allege non-criminal misconduct by an officer. So they would have an opportunity to view that footage at a police station to the extent that it does not violate the individual privacy rights of someone else who may have been captured by the footage, as well as a person who is the subject of a non-criminal action would have an opportunity at a police station to view the footage. And I think one of the issues that Aaron may have raised is whether or not a person who is making a complaint about non-criminal conduct of an officer having access to the footage, whereas a person who is actually the victim, perhaps, of alleged criminal activity and is a defendant in an actual case that is filed, having to go through the discovery process in Rule 16 with the court to obtain footage that a person who's not a defendant might otherwise have access to at an earlier point. So without getting too far in the weeds, there are a number of things that we have to unpack to really understand what we're trying to do here. And I know it's a little complicated, perhaps, for some of the folks.
Hey, we're deep in the weeds already.
Yeah, we are. But I think, you know, to credit the Bowser administration, we've come a long way. in the city from where we were several months ago. And I think when you talk to a number of people who've been following us closely, I think we're on the verge of having something that serves as a model for people around the country.
I mean, still people who want to talk about the homeless issue, but go ahead first, Aaron.
Oh, just council member is correct. I mean, originally the mayor did propose exempting all of this footage from release under public records request. So we are a long ways from that. Whether this is the model that everyone follows, I think, is yet to be seen. You know, the mayor is really trying to rush the deployment of these cameras into use. So we will also have a chance under her tenure to see just how that works. And she'll, you know, for good or bad, have to own a lot of it, how it comes about.
And part of my hesitancy in the initial stages was that I support body-worn cameras. I've done a lot of research along with my staff with the need of body-worn cameras and how they can be effective, a tool in really capturing police community interactions and really trying to head off some of the unfounded complaints against police officers, but also making sure that you protect those who interact with police. But at the same time, I've advocated that we take a measured approach when introducing technology that's so new. Because the video footage and the cameras technology is way ahead of the actual technology with redacting the footage. Yeah. And so that's been posing one of the largest issues.
Several people want to weigh in on the homeless issue. I will start with Jackie in Washington, D.C. Jackie, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm a D.C. resident, and I've been in the D.C. area for over 20 years now, and I worked as a case manager for homeless veterans. And my question and sort of comment is I'm aware of different efforts that have been put in place to create affordable housing, such as inclusionary zoning and the rapid rehousing program. But oftentimes I come across the challenge of families not even meeting the minimum requirement of income for those programs. And I just wanted to know what are the strategies or process in place to be able to create more affordable housing for it, especially for families that have been in the district for a long time.
Kenyon McDuffie.
Sure, and Jackie, you know, as somebody who spent some time working on these issues, you are spot on with the challenges that residents in the District of Columbia are facing, both those who find themselves in a position of being homeless and others who, you know, have a home but are trying to make sure that they can maintain quality, affordable housing in the city. And so you mentioned inclusionary zoning. You talked about rapid rehousing. In terms of other things that the city has been doing to try to make sure that we have quality, affordable housing for those who are moving into the city, but as you mentioned, importantly, those who've been here for quite some time who'd like to stay. The mayor in her budget sent down $100 million in the Housing Reduction Trust Fund. We supported it at the council, and that is now part of the budget for fiscal year 2016. I can speak, you know, directly about some of the things that I've done. And you know, last year I passed, with the help of my colleagues and then Council Member Bowser, some really great legislation that would require the city, anytime there's a public land that's being disposed of, to create multifamily housing in the District of Columbia of 10 units or more, that there would be a set aside for affordable housing. It would be a set aside for 20% if it's not near mass transit or a metro station. It would be a set aside for 30% if it is within 1 mile of a metro station. And that's something that we're starting to try to implement here in the city. Mayor Bowser, again, then was a council member, and she co-introduced the bill that I had written. And she's been really an advocate on trying to make sure that we maximize the affordable housing, particularly when we're disposing of public land. And so that's one thing that I think we can do better, a better job of. And I think we're moving in the direction of making sure that we're doing precisely that.
Thank you very much for your call. We got an email from Catherine who says it is entirely unrealistic to expect that every ward will be a place for small homeless shelters. Wards in Northwest will successfully push back, and NIMBYism will be successful. Please comment.
I can definitely comment on that, Catherine. And you raise, I think, an issue that will probably be the most significant issue in this debate, whether or not there's equity in how we distribute the smaller homeless shelters throughout the city. As the representative of Ward 5.
Oh, yes, where residents are particularly upset, sometimes even paranoid about the amount of stuff that they feel gets dumped in Ward 5.
Sure. And I don't use that phrase, Kojo. You know, I will not ever, I've struck that from my vocabulary. But historically, Ward 5 has been the place where you've seen a lot of municipal uses, whether it's the trash transfer stations, the parking lots for the heavy equipment and snow plows, or the salt domes, or the paint spray booths where people are painting cars. We've traditionally been the place that you locate those, because we have more industrial land in Ward 5 than any other part of the city. We also have warehouses and other places where you can house homeless people, which is why we have several shelters already in Ward 5. And so there needs to be more of a balance. And I've had conversations with the mayor and conversations with the deputy mayor for Health and Human Services about the need to strike a more appropriate balance so that we have some degree of equity, and that we all neighborhoods try to make sure that we are doing our share to deal with what is a really acute problem in the District of Columbia. Now, what Catherine mentions about NIMBYism is important, but even more importantly is the reality that it costs more to house somebody in Ward 3 than it would to house somebody in Ward 8, just by virtue of the fact of the property values, where you'd have to try to locate some of these people. But that notwithstanding, we still have to make a concerted effort throughout the city to address a problem that affects people in every single ward of the city.
Can't let you go without talking about crime, because you're chair of the Judiciary Committee, which includes public safety. When we spoke to you last, we talked a lot about the spike in violent crime here in the city. Unfortunately, that trend has not abated. We've now passed the 100 homicide mark, and we saw more violence over the Labor Day weekend. What do you think are some of the reasons behind this? Frankly, in my view, no one seems to know for sure, but I understand that you're holding a public hearing next week.
I am. I'm holding a public hearing next week on September 16th at 5 p.m. And I would encourage your listeners to sign up and testify and to focus on solutions. I've been telling everybody that, it's going to be difficult to point a finger at precisely what one or two things is causing the crime. But I'm more interested in solutions. What's clear, Kojo and Aaron, is that we have a crisis on our hand here in the District of Columbia, and we need to treat the violence, particularly the homicides, like the health epidemic that it really is. We need to make sure that we're taking a broader approach than simply focusing on law enforcement. Obviously, if somebody commits a crime, particularly a violent crime, then they need to be arrested and prosecuted, and justice needs to happen swiftly. But at the same time, we need to recognize that a lot of the people who are going to be arrested and prosecuted, and if they're successfully convicted and sentenced, they're going to come right back home to the neighborhoods from where they came. And so we need to make sure that we broaden the scope of our work to support law enforcement by including our health department, including our human service agencies, including our workforce development agencies, to really take an approach that goes to the root causes of crime. So in the short term, obviously, we're working with law enforcement to make sure that we're targeting the folks who are at highest risk and making sure that we're making arrests. But at the same time, we've got to broaden our approach to how we deal with crime prevention here in the District of Columbia.
Aaron.
Yeah, I was going to you've been more diplomatic on this issue than some of your colleagues, including the council chairman, Phil Mendelson, who, said the mayor and the police chief need to explain their shifting positions and what is the root cause of all of this, and highlighting one and then another. You haven't done that. But I do want to see if you can draw a line with the mayor. I mean, how much time does she have to turn the corner on this before you believe this is a problem that is rooted in her administration versus, long-standing, whatever issues we're talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. And I'll leave that to you guys to talk about and to write stories about. I'll say this. The reason that you haven't heard me really engage in some of the other back and forth that my colleagues have is because, not only have I worked in this area, I've been a former prosecutor, civil rights attorney. I've grown up in this city. And so what I know from talking to residents across the district is that they are not interested in having their elected officials point fingers at one another. They're not interested in having us point fingers at the police department. You've heard the chief say that we cannot arrest ourselves out of this problem. She said it on your show just a couple of weeks ago, and I wholeheartedly agree with her. We need strong law enforcement, particularly for those who commit violent crimes. But we also need to make sure that we're addressing the root causes of crime, and we're addressing the culture of violence that exists in our city. We can lock people up, sure, we've done that, but we can't revert back to the days of being tough on crime and over-concentrating and overpopulating our prisons with folks who commit low-level offenses.
Right. I think politically, though, the question that there is for the mayor, both the body camera legislation, the talk of adding more police on the streets, she has used many times in her talking on us, want to make Black Lives Matter more than a hashtag. And but I think all of this kind of is combining for her in a question of, is she taking a side of more enforcement? Some of the critics east of the river say she's tone deaf to the idea of the Black Lives Matter campaign. where do you see that she is on this?
Well, I know where I am
got
on
about a
this.
minute left.
I know where I am on this, Kojo, and I am, rightly on the side of, pursuing policies that keep residents and visitors to the District of Columbia safe, that balance the need to make sure that we go after folks who commit violent crimes, but at the same time addressing the underlying causes, balancing the need to be fair and equitable in how we police our streets, and making sure that in the midst of a spike in violence and homicides, we don't forget that our prisons are already overpopulated, and that we can't arrest ourselves out of this problem. And when we send somebody away for a period of incarceration, the majority of times they're going to come right back home to these communities, and they're going to deal with the same problems that existed when they left. And so we need to get at the heart of those problems by engaging our credible messengers and engaging individuals and organizations who have the trust in these communities. We know, for the most part, Kojo, the population that we're dealing with. In some cases, we know the individuals you're talking about. So let's target them with the resources of government.
Kenyon McDuffie is a DC council member representing Ward 5. Councilmember McDuffie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Kojo. Always a pleasure.
Also in studio with us is Aaron Davis. He's a reporter with the Washington Post. He joins us today as our guest analyst. We'll shortly be talking with the Arlington County Board Chair. But speaking of Virginia, Aaron Davis, the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office has released the video of the incident involving Natasha McKenna, the mentally ill woman who, after being restrained by sheriff's deputies in her jail cell, died. And watching the video on, frankly, the site of the Washington Post was quite disturbing. But one of the more disturbing aspects about it is that when we think of cameras, we expect to see exactly what's going on. But in the case of this camera view, while disturbing, we could hardly ever see Natasha McKenna because she was blanketed, so to speak, by the 4 sheriff deputies who were attempting to restrain her. And so the video itself is quite inconclusive, except to the extent that obviously there needs to be some retraining done here.
Right. This is a pretty provocative video, and I think it's one that's going to circulate around for a long time because it looks like something you don't expect to see in a U.S. prison. You don't expect to see, especially in a local prison. You don't expect to see people with white biohazard suits coming in and pushing someone to the ground and tasering them multiple times. And if you do, you might already be, pretty concerned about the state of public safety in the country. But, this is it. It's a 19-minute video. You see her tasered 4 times, and it did bring some questions. I think people who are inclined to believe that the police did something wrong can still leave the video thinking that, because you don't see a lot of her. You're right. She's behind these white biosuits, and the police will say, well, they took every time. They had a nurse there. They tried to do everything they could.
And the Arlington County the Fairfax County prosecutor said that she exhibited superhuman strength. I didn't see any evidence of that in the video.
Well,
I may have missed something.
All right. Well, the fact that they did subdue her by, pushing her to the ground using the force of their body weight, that's something that, the National Alliance for Mental Illness did say, this is not the way to de-escalate a situation with someone who has mental illness. And so I think that's something to come. And the term that was used, if you remember, excited delirium,
highly disputed term.
You still have to, it raises more questions about that, I would say, given.
Joining us in studio now is Mary Hines. She is the Arlington County Board Chair. Mary Hines, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Kojo, it's great to be here.
If you have questions or comments for Mary Hines, you can call us at 800-433-8850. If you want to take a look at her and us, you can go to our website, kojoshow.org, and watch the live video stream. Join the conversation there. Send us a tweet at Kojo Show, or email to kojo@wamu.org. Today is the anniversary of the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. Arlington residents and emergency personnel experienced that attack most directly. Can you talk about that and how the county is commemorating that day? Do you remember, and I'm sure you do, exactly what you were doing on that day?
I do, Kojo. I was the chair of the Arlington County Board, not the Arlington School Board, responsible for about 18,000 young people in about 30 different buildings, and was at home, and somebody called me and said, turn on the TV. called the superintendent, and the day unfolded from there for us. People may recall that the Pentagon was hit, of course, and the plane came in right over one of our schools, right over the playground where kids were out waiting for the day to begin. It turned out the principal at that school's husband did die at the Pentagon, so we were touched deeply. But the story went on because 2 days later, when we opened school back up, none of our kids from Arab backgrounds came to school. And so we needed to get on the phones and call people and say, come on back. So this morning at 9:30, I joined our police force and our first responders out in front of our plaza, and we did a moment of silence and remembered the blue sky, no clouds, the incredible September sun. It's been that way every September 11th since. So certainly a marker in my life, in the life of Arlington, the beginning of change, I think, in the Arlington economy and how we've all moved forward from there.
A marker in the life of the nation and the world.
Yep.
You are Arlington's representative to Metro and a member of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. Boy, if Metro hasn't been in the news, and not for good reasons, what do all of these roles entail? I infer from them that you are Arlington's point person on all things transportation.
Well, not quite all. I don't serve on the Transportation Planning Board at the Council of Governments, but I do wear a lot of hats. Transportation is the lifeblood of Arlington. Our community wouldn't be as successful as it is if we didn't have Metro. And so making sure Metro works, making sure we're planning for reinvestment, making sure we're working with our regional partners is a very high priority for those of us in elected office in Arlington.
You were at a meeting yesterday, it's my understanding. Metro is taking a lot of heat for a series of incidents, safety lapses, stumbles. Last week, Metro's chief safety officer was forced to resign, and this week, the Transit Authority said it intends to hire a consulting firm to perform a top-to-bottom review. Can you talk about what's going on and what do you feel is needed now to help solve Metro's safety issues?
Well, I think we're doing the right thing to hire this consultant. We've had a lot of new members join the board. We have a lot of fresh eyes. I went on the board myself in 2011, the last time we had a big change in the membership. But the point of this consultant is really to look soup to nuts at the operations of the organization, not just the railroad, but all of the back of the house stuff. Let's get that all lined up. We know from the FTA FMO report last year that we've got financial issues that we're continuing to work on. And we're in the process of hiring a general manager. So this is partly to give the general manager, when we get to hiring them, hopefully by the end of the year, a better roadmap, some outside eyes looking to help them figure out how to work best with the board moving forward.
Aaron Davis is our guest analyst today. He's a reporter with the Washington Post. Aaron.
Yeah, it's interesting. In D.C., there's a lot of bad things said about WMATA. And since the Republican governor in Maryland has taken over, they've kind of locked hands on this, and they cast Virginia as the one that wants to give WMATA a pass and focus more on the transit needs instead of the finances of the system. Do you take issue with that generality?
I think it's a gross generality and certainly an over simplification of what Virginia is saying. We agree that the organization needs renewal, reorganization, all of those kinds of RE words. We also know that we have to keep running the trains on time and that we have to focus on service. And at the moment, it feels a little like we're so focused on getting our house in order that we've forgotten that we need to run service too. So I think we're looking for a balance here. We need a general manager. We really need a general manager. We also need to get our house in order. They have to happen together. They don't necessarily both have to be the same person, but we've got to find a way to move this agency back into stability because it is vital to the region. Look at all the disruption the Pope coming in 2 weeks is going to have to how this all works.
We're hearing about budgetary pressures now, too. Can you update us? Are we going to see fare hikes, service cuts?
Well, the board has a policy of hiking fares, of at least looking at fares every 2 years. So this next budget...
Oh, you were right the first time. Hiking fares every 2 years.
Well, they did take a pass for a couple of years, right? But and everybody recognizes that if fares don't increase and costs go up, the jurisdictions have to pay more, or we have to cut something, right? So this is the time of the year when that conversation starts. I think that there's a great deal of sympathy among all board members for the fact that our customers aren't getting the service that they expect, nor that they should have access to. The jurisdictions are also in a tough spot in terms of revenue growth. Nobody's seeing a huge revenue growth these days. And we have a governor in Maryland who isn't as interested in transit as the last governor was. So it's going to be a very difficult conversation if we don't raise fares. If jurisdictions can't put more money on the table, we can cut management. But there's only so much of that you can cut and still run the trains on time. So it's going to be a hard conversation.
Is there a timeline for the hiring of the new general manager? And are we all agreed about what that person's priorities should be?
Well, the person's priorities are to run the agency. We're trying with the consultant to give that person more tools, a better, consistent outside look at what's wrong with how the agency operates. I think the hope is, Kojo, that by the end of the year, there'll be a manager on board. The search process is actively going forward.
As we discussed with Councilmember McDuffie, Pope Francis will be in D.C. in less than 2 weeks, and WMATA is responsible for mitigating the impact on transit and traffic. How is WMATA preparing? Prayer might be a good start.
Well, we won't turn away any prayers. The fact that the shrine is where the mass is going to be and that it has limited transportation assets already in place is a huge challenge for the region. I saw the press releases going out saying to people, as many people as possible ought to telework and just not get into the system if you can. We've got bus bridges. Jack Requa and his team have been working, as we do for every one of these big events, with all of the planners across the region to do this. I think it's fair to say it's going to be a difficult getting around the region couple of days.
It might have been the most blunt I've seen Mr. Requa talking about expect delays, period. That was it on WMATA yesterday. Didn't make any bones about it, especially around Brookland and the 25,000 people into one station on one line. And all the bus routes around there are going to be delayed or rerouted as well. What is your prime concern right now on WMATA? And do you think this really is a governable organization in this current context? I mean, what assurances do you think the public should have that they can figure out how to?
I think there's a pretty dedicated set of people sitting at the table right now. We're learning to work together. I mean, anybody who's been part of an organization, when you turn over more than half of the folks in your group, there's always a shakedown period. And I hope we're through the beginning shakedown and we're beginning to find our way together to be a good governing board. The fact that people come from all around the region to try to find their way through has some strength in it. It also has some risk in it. And so I would say to folks, we haven't lost our focus. If you listen to the board meetings, you hear people advocating for riders. You hear people advocating for reasonable fares. You hear people advocating to grow our bus service because that's what we can do next. We don't have the money to build the metro out to more and more places. So we're working through it. There's a lot of issues, though, on the table, and it is an aging system. Got to keep investing in maintenance as well.
Here is James in Ward 8 in Washington. James, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'd like to ask her why people in Ward 8 are not allowed to use the restrooms at Anacostia Station and Congress Heights Station.
And what stations are you allowed to use the bathroom at?
You can use the bathrooms at Verizon Center, if there's one there. I've used the restroom at other subway stations that's not in Ward 8, downtown, or even on the Red Line.
Mary Hines, do you know anything about that?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, so I apologize. I don't know the answer. I know that sometimes there are issues with restrooms not working. I know that sometimes there are safety issues associated with restrooms being open. I think the policy is that station managers would go with someone to open them, and it maybe there's insufficient station manager resource to make sure that escorting can happen. But Coach, I don't know about those
James,
two.
sorry we can't answer that question for you right now. Hopefully at some point in the future we will be able to do so. Our guest is Mary Hines. She is the Arlington County Board Chair. Your counterparts in Alexandria voted to ban Confederate flags which were flown twice a year, and they're reviewing streets and memorials named in honor of Confederates. And Virginia just shipped the first Sons of Confederate Veterans license plates out without the image of a Confederate flag. What about Arlington? Are there similar discussions taking place there about Confederate symbols and street names?
The conversation in Arlington has been mostly about Route 1, Jefferson Davis Highway, which runs, through Crystal City and down into Alexandria. And our board has had some conversation. We've certainly heard from some residents. The control of the name of that street actually lies with the General Assembly. So we put together a legislative package every year. We plan to ask the General Assembly to consider a name change, one that would be comfortable for the people who work and live on that road in Arlington. And we'll see what happens in the General Assembly with that request.
It's a challenge the entire region is facing, but as the federal government shrinks, places like Arlington, home to a large number of federal employees, are hit especially hard. What's it meant for Arlington residents where so many work in government jobs or with government contractors?
It's perhaps one of the greatest changes, Kojo, in what's going on in Arlington today. For a very long time, we have had the advantage of growth, and we've had people with really secure jobs who are planning for retirement that felt really secure. Now we are in a plateau. We've built out our metro lines, and our folks are feeling pretty shaky about whether they're going to get raises. Do they have enough money in their retirements? And so this whole conversation has become more sharpened around taxes. I would also say that, in my view, the federal government isn't a fair partner these days as it seeks to find new places for its agencies. It wants local governments to treat every building that they're in as if they owned it, and were not eligible to pay taxes, but they want them in the best places, in the most expensive places. And so it puts built-out spots like Arlington at a real disadvantage in this competitive market.
I want to talk about Columbia Pike, an area that runs roughly between the Pentagon and Annandale. It's home to more than 130 nationalities, been described as a world in a zip code. After $160 million in planning, plans for a streetcar were scrapped last November. What does that mean for the future of Columbia Pike and transportation in that part of the country?
Well, it's a good
In the
question,
county.
and it's a good question, Kojo. And we have launched a transportation development planning process with our citizens to take a look at, since we can't have rail, which I think would have been a long-term important strategic move for the county to make, one that our citizens at that point in time were not accepting of. What do we do instead? And so
Gondolas, J-Pods.
well, we're hearing those. It's not an irrational thing, quite honestly. If you can't go down and you can't get rails in the street, why not think about going up, right? If you're
I've looked
trying,
at the models for it. It seems to be they seem to be hanging in space, but at least it's an alternative mode of transportation.
it'll be an interesting conversation, without a doubt. Getting reliable transportation on that corridor, connecting it to Crystal City and to Skyline, is critical to the future of that part of our county and to our economy. So we've got to figure it out.
Solar-powered gondolas is what people are asking for. It brings us to another topic unique to Arlington, a long-range planning effort to decide the best use of public land.
Mhm.
What areas fall into that category?
Well, we actually don't own a whole lot of land. Arlington is a small place, 26 and a half square miles, and a chunk of it's the Pentagon and National Cemetery. So we've been having a pretty robust conversation about new places for schools, making sure we have enough parks, any number of other things. And then how does affordable housing play into places where we are already investing public dollars to build public buildings?
Is there any way to come to some consensus on priorities? Because it's a great idea rather than making decisions piecemeal, but it's not that easy otherwise. More cities and counties would be doing?
We launched a big study this year involving more than 250 residents to talk about that issue. The first report is coming the end of September. They're going to talk to us about a comprehensive process the two boards, school board and county board, would use together to create priorities and then drive the funding after that. So we're working together to try to create a new pathway with a new set of residents who will understand sort of what the trade-offs are. Part of what happened in Arlington over time was people got to pick their lane and stay in it. That's not a luxury we have anymore. You can't just be a park person or a home, affordable housing person. These things have to come together so that we do multi-use solutions in the scarce land we have.
Running out of time very quickly, Aaron.
Oh, I'm just going to say, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about stepping down and why. I mean, all these things you're talking about, there's a lot more tension in Arlington over these issues of finances, and you've been a big proponent of capital projects.
I have.
I was wondering what that streetcar fight took out of you, and if that's a reason, or if you could clue us in to what happens.
Mary Hines has announced that she's retiring from the board at the end of this term in December. Why?
That's right. Well, before I did these 8 years, I did 12 years on the school board. So for 20 years, Arlington, I've gotten up thinking about Arlington, breathing Arlington, 24/7 on the deck for Arlington. And I'll say, quite honestly, I'm tired. I can't work 70 and 80-hour weeks anymore for the amount of pay I get. And it's time for new eyes. It's time for fresh perspectives.
You're not moving out of the county, are you?
Nope. Got a great house near Clarendon.
Mary Hines is Arlington County Board Chair at least until the end of this year. Mary Hines, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kojo.
Next Friday, September 18th, Mayor Muriel Bowser will be joining us on the Politics Hour for a special broadcast here at WAMU with a live audience. The event is free, but a limited number of seats are available. For tickets, please visit wamu.org/events to reserve your seat. Our guest analyst today, Aaron Davis. He's a reporter with the Washington Post. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Tom Sherwood will be back next week when we have Mayor Bowser here in the studio. Thank you all for listening. I'm Kojo Namdi.